Malcolm. Stand up, Scott.
I did.
We all did.
Good evening. This is the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board. I'll begin with a script for remotely conducted hybrid meetings. This is a Zoom meeting allowing the public to participate. All questions should be directed through the chair. I will now confirm that all members are present and can hear me. Dave Franzuto.
Here.
Scott Anderson.
Here.
Peter Brace.
Here.
Jim Sherlin.
Here.
Ginger Andrews. Dave Bossy.
Here.
Is Ginger with us?
Suppose so. Ginger, you there?
For staff tonight, we have Tara Riley.
Yeah.
Anticipated speakers tonight on the agenda. We don't have any on the agenda, but when it's time to speak, you'll have to state your name, please. Good evening. This open meeting of the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. For this meeting, the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note this meeting is being recorded. Take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials have been provided to the members of this body are available at the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Please hold until your name is called to speak on any agenda item, and please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair. After members have spoken, for items with public comment, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom or present at the meeting. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Any vote taken tonight will be conducted by a roll call vote. I'll call to order this meeting, the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board, December 5th, 2023. And we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda, please.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion's made by Mr. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Brace to approve tonight's agenda. All in favor, Mr. Brace,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Sherlin.
Aye.
Mr. Franzuto, Mr. Bossy,
Aye.
Mr. Andrews.
She's there. She's just not.
Maybe need to turn your microphone on or something, Ginger, please. Has everybody had a chance to review minutes from November 21st? Are there any revisions requested? If not, I'll accept a motion to approve.
Haven't seen the minutes.
Anybody else?
Is that better?
Yes, hi, Ginger.
Hi there. Sorry, somehow I got muted.
Do we have a motion to approve tonight's meeting or minutes or November 21st minutes, or shall we continue into our next
We
meeting?
did them.
I'm sorry?
We did them. I wasn't here.
Oh, we've got them on the agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, those are from the previous meeting. We had some changes. Scott Anderson had a couple changes that were going to be put in, so we decided to put it off until this meeting. So that's 2 meetings ago.
The name wasn't on it or something, wasn't that what it was?
Yeah, my name was not on there. There's a couple other numbers that needed to be changed.
Just in the attendance section. We will continue approval of minutes for our next meeting. Marine Department report. Do we have any representation?
We do not.
Natural Resources. Tara, please.
All right, was JC online? Did you see him up there?
No.
Okay. All right, so I think for November, the bushel count, this is from JC that I heard from Jeff, so I haven't seen any paperwork on it yet, but I think it's around 11 or 1,200 bushels for November. I hear there are 2 people fishing in Mattakit right now, and we're counting 15 to around 15 boats in Nantucket Harbor when we go out to move seed. As far as updates go, there was a stranding that we were notified on Facebook by Blair Perkins up in Wawinnett on the 29th. And when we got out there in the afternoon, the tide was coming up, so it was kind of hard to see. So we decided, after talking with NSA, that we would go up in the morning. NRD staff would go up and evaluate it and decide what to do. And there were some fishermen on standby to help later in the afternoon. And it turned out to be 108 fish totes that we moved. So that was around 1 million seed off of the beach, and it was really healthy. It was under eelgrass, under the rack line. So it was nice and moist, and we felt really good about the condition of the seed that got moved to the area, lower harbor area. We didn't end up using NSA boats just because we were so far up harbor that it didn't make sense to come down harbor, offload, and then reload again. So we just handled that one, but it was a lot more than we had anticipated for that one. But up until today, the total amount of seed that we have either taken off the beach or from the shallows is about 14.5 million seed. Right now, there's 2 hatcheries on the Cape that sell scallop seed, and they sell anywhere from $80 per thousand to $105 per thousand seed. And these are small seed, and stuff we have is pretty big. So the value for what we're doing right now is up over $1 million worth of seed if we were gonna move it. If all the seed were to survive to adulthood, which we don't anticipate, but if it did, it would be around 36,000 bushels of adults next season, which would support 67 fishermen with a full limit for 108 days of fishing. So it's a worthwhile effort, I think, that we're doing. We've been mapping all over the Nantucket Harbor where the seed is going. So we have amounts for each section. So when we go to do our spring surveys, we'll be able to evaluate what got put there and compare it to what we saw in the fall as well. And then we'll monitor it through the summertime for low oxygen events. And we get back in the water the first 2 weeks of September to do a whole harbor survey again. So we'll have an idea of what survived through kind of the challenging months of the summer. Right now, we have around 100 more bushels that we want to move to the lower harbor from the quays, Wawinnett, and Bass Shoal area. And then after that, we're hoping to be approved to move seed over to Mattakit Harbor and Tuckernuck, and we have a plan for that. We're waiting on pathology from a laboratory in Maine. We had to send samples of scallops from Nantucket Harbor in order to transfer them to Mattakit Harbor. And while we were at it, we went ahead and took samples from Mattakit Harbor and sent them those too, so we can compare the 2 pathology reports. In case something showed up in Nantucket Harbor, we wanted to know if it would show up in Mattakit Harbor too. So it would kind of make the transfer easier if 2 things showed up in the same place. So far, the bacteriology reports are clean. There's no diseases. And now we're waiting on histology, which shows if there's any parasites, which is of concern from like the Peconic Bay area. There's a parasite that they're noticing in the bay scallops, and so we're just checking to see if it's also in Nantucket, and if it is, in what amounts in both harbors. So we should have those results by the end of the week. If everything's clean, we would like to start planning a transfer of the seed from Bass Shoal over to Mattakit Harbor to seed different areas of that harbor. We have not found a lot of seed in Mattakit Harbor. I don't know if any of you guys are fishing in Mattakit Harbor, if you've seen a lot. But I think it would be worthwhile to move some over. We have been towing a little bit around Bash Shoal just to check on that, because that was the location where we had 500 scallops per meter squared, which is a huge, they were just like piled. And so we had anticipated some die-off because of the densities, and so we towed some of those up last week, and they came up big and healthy. Hardly saw like no shell or anything. Some decent adults in there too, so I was pretty happy with how they were looking so far. So if we're able to move stuff to Mattakit, we're thinking like the outer edges of Mattakit and the middle of Mattakit, and then in the spring, if there's still a little bit of seed left to move, we'll move in closer to like Warren's Landing, Little Neck area after some of the windstorms pass and stuff, so those don't blow up on shore. But you know, thinking since we have all the seed, it would make sense to seed some areas for recreational people too. What else? We received a check from the Great Harbor Yacht Club, so we'll be getting our second bioreactor in a couple weeks, which we're very excited about. And that's going to produce the other 50% of our algae that we need to feed the shellfish for the hatchery. And I know that everybody's here to talk about bushel count, so I'm excited to hear about that. And if you have any questions regarding the seed or concerns about seed moving, let me know. That's pretty much what we're doing right now. And as far as hatchery staff goes, it's where we're focusing our energy and efforts.
Any indication of oyster borers in town or in Mattakit within the scallop population, that there would be a concern in transferring
You mean
town
like
scallops?
the worms?
Yeah,
I mean, that will show up in the pathology reports with the histology.
okay, so we're still waiting on that. Board members, questions,
Yes.
Mr. Brace?
So now that you have 2 reactors coming, or you will have 2 reactors, and you'll produce all the algae in those 2 reactors. The whole system that you were creating the algae in, what happens to all that? And if you ditch all that, then that's extra space. So do you have some sort of plan for?
Yeah, so we grow 6 different types of algae, and 2 of the main algae obviously are for the bioreactors, and then the supplemental species, which are diatoms and larger species of algae we use to mature our broodstock for spawning. And we grow those in smaller amounts, so we'll probably keep a line of the cow walls, the big tubes, to grow the supplemental stuff and some of the carboys that we use. But we have like 5-gallon carboys that were donated to us from Tate. And so I don't know what we'll do. I'm kind of hoping maybe we'll have a hatchery in Mattakit. I don't know. We'll see. I'm hanging on to it for now. But yes, we do have extra space.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman?
Ginger, please.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering if there's a free swimming life stage for the scallops and when they might be doing that, if there is.
Free swimming life stage for the scallops, is that what she said?
Right.
Like the phase?
Did you catch that, Ginger? Like the larval phase?
Yeah. I mean,
So
how much are they able to move themselves, I guess is my question.
the scallops are free swimming and move around during their larval phase, which is usually the first 14 days, depending on temperature. And they move up and down in the water column, and that's on the 14th day, kind of when they go through metamorphosis and they want to attach to the eelgrass and kind of settle down. They can move and swim around, obviously, and I've never heard of any like mass migrations or anything, but I do know that they're able to move away from predators and kind of move small distances.
Question answered, Ginger?
Yeah, I just, had sort of heard anecdotally about them moving around, and I wasn't expecting that they would do a big migration, but just curious about, their ability to move around and, why they would do that or where they would go
Well, they are,
or how
very,
far.
they're very vulnerable to the currents and, the wind and wave action, especially in the winter. So like what we're seeing in Nantucket Harbor with the large amounts and the very, short and, sparse eelgrass is that they're just blowing in like what we call windrows closer and closer to shore. And we have seen, one year we had a bunch on Bass Shoal that were really, really thick. And they did over time kind of bounce their way towards Pocomo. So they can, get shifted that way.
I guess in relation to what Ginger's asking, I had some curiosity on that as well, and as did some fishermen that were here at maybe 2 meetings ago. Specifically Jan Jellamy diving before this season and knowing where he had moved some seed prior. Specifically, he mentioned moving some seed to the Hulbert Ave area. And when he dove just before the season opened, he didn't find any there. And how can you actually follow them or determine where they've ended up?
Yeah, they're not always where you place them. And I know like Hulbert Ave in particular is like with all of the ferries coming and going, there's a lot of wave energy there that kind of shifts stuff around. But yeah, it's not uncommon to put scallops in a place and you go back and you can't find them because they've shifted or moved.
Any other questions from the board? Comments on Natural Resource Department report? Anything from the public at this point on Natural Resources report? I'd like to mention to the public that's present with us tonight that I understand what you're all here for as well, if it's bushel count. And I'm sorry it's not on the agenda, so we'll have to take it up near the end of the meeting during public comment, which shouldn't be too far off, but with it not being on the agenda, we won't be able to vote tonight, as far as I know, unless we somehow kind of get it underneath seed management and red flag days. But we'll discuss that more when we bring up the subject. Any comments from the public tonight on Natural Resources Department report?
I just have one question. Tara, you said about, I think you might have misspoke. I thought I heard you say 100 bushels off of that shoulder, you mean 100 totes?
We didn't get 100.
No, we want to move 100 totes is what, you said you want to move another 100 bushels off of that.
No, I mean, I don't know what it would have put, I'd have to do the math real quick, but.
I know there's quite a bit there.
Yeah, there's a lot there. But we were thinking over to Mattakit, what we had estimated so far would be like around 1.4 million, if there was that much there, which I think there probably is.
Yeah, that's what we always used to, Dave, you can remember, we always used to move it off there. In March, it seemed like it always congregated there for one reason or another.
It's so big too. It looks great.
Thank you, Bob. That's Bob DeCosta for the record. John Logan.
John Logan, Tara, question for you. Do we have an idea of what happened to the stuff that we moved from Mattakit to that eelgrass restoration area? Has that been successful? And I'm just wondering, are we moving cross harbors? Is that effort viable?
Yes, so we weren't supposed to evidently move from harbor to harbor without the DMF knowing, but we knew that since there's so much seed right now that it's very public what's going on, so we wanted to make sure that we did everything correctly. As far as like moving to the Hussey Shoal, I don't know that we have a survey site on there. I know that, I think we went back and read later on and checked it out and found it. I'm not really sure like the outcome of it, but
right, it's in a spreadsheet somewhere that you and I went over at your office, and when we were
did
measuring,
measurements, yeah.
when we were measuring like the success of the different Mattakit sites, the Hussey Shoal eelgrass restoration area had a significantly larger grass size than even the best of Mattakit sites.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what exactly it was.
Yeah, I'll probably look that up, but
So short term, yes, it was successful as far as growth. Past that, as far as,
Yeah.
yield and catching, not sure.
May I continue?
Yeah.
Have we done a town thematic move before? Yes.
Yeah.
And was it successful?
I don't know
Years
that.
ago, wasn't it? I mean, before we actually kept records.
Yeah.
Move seed
Mhm.
back and forth from harbor to harbor and it all took.
Yeah, I think the difference now is we have a long-term monitoring plan, so we're definitely like in the water a lot in the spring and the fall, checking these sites. That we're taking seed from, so we'll have an idea of what the densities are now after moving seed, and then also where they're going to. So we have 40 sites in the harbor that we'll be checking, throughout the summer.
Just a reminder, all comments through the chair, please. Anybody else? Public comment on natural resources report? Not seeing or hearing any, we'll move forward into our business, seed management and red flag days. We've kept this on here. I'm quite concerned. I know some of the old timers still believe there ought to be strictly volunteer. And hey, my heart goes out to volunteerism. But let's face it, in all aspects across the board, there's very little volunteerism. We're not asking for red flag days for developers and investors to fix or repair or manage the public areas that they use for their business. We don't ask people who use the soccer fields to take a day off from work to fix the soccer fields. We just appropriated $3.8 million to repair 4 soccer fields. So to ask developers to work for free, plus, spend money on fuel, wear and tear on the boat, I personally don't think it's fair. And I appreciate the Shellfish Association for stepping up and doing as best as they can in compensation, but we can't expect that throughout the future. And part of our discussion later will be on the embarkation fee. I personally feel that if we have time, I believe we have time, Mr. DaCosta might be able to help us with this, but to get an article in for town meeting through the select board. Tried to draft one a little earlier to see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds collected from the embarkation fee, the sum of $100,000 per year, to be spent by the Natural Resources Department with the approval of the select board for the purpose of supplemental funding for services of commercial scallopers when necessary in the management of scallop seed and strandings. And we could continue that with any remaining funds can be spent as seen necessary by the Natural Resources Department. I don't think $100,000 is a whole lot to ask for. So far, this town has put $100 million into affordable housing. How many millions of dollars into playing fields? I don't think $100,000 to compensate scallopers for seed management is a whole lot to ask for. And Mr. Franzuto, what did what was the embarkation fee up to collected annually? That
$225, but I we'll discuss it later, but
no, the total amount, was it 4.3 million or
No.
something? No, okay,
No, what was collected last year was 225,000.
okay.
The more that I look into it, the more I believe it's being underreported.
Mhm. Well, and the other thing that could be, revised on this is where the money comes from. We don't have to limit it to the embarkation fee at all, and that may actually limit the passing of the article if we don't have other sources to allow it to come from.
I having read the legislation for the last 6 weeks numerous times for different reasons, I would believe it'd be a stretch to dedicate embarkation fees for that.
Mm,
I mean, if I may,
please do.
I have I agree with you in principle, however, I have a different slant on that. Yeah, maybe the soccer people aren't taking a Saturday off to go fix the soccer fields, and nobody has more respect and worked with the fishermen longer than I have. But I gotta tell you, we have a very, very expensive and state-of-the-art hatchery that supports that fishery that no other community has. And the benefits and the cost to the fishermen are significant. So I still believe that, and if Carl Sherman was here with me, I know he would agree with me, is that, I don't know how Bobby feels about this. I honestly believe, as I said the other night, quite emphatically, I see absolutely nothing wrong with taking a Friday off to move seed to support this industry. I really don't. I really felt that that was the best possible way to do it. And those people that didn't participate would not be allowed to fish, and the seed got moved. And if we want to go into further discussions about regulation changes in the future for fishermen's compensation and stuff, I'd be more than willing to talk about that. But I think we've done a good job in supporting this fishery.
I understand, Mr. Franzuto. I see it as how much we've invested in the hatchery, and it's a wonderful investment, but it's an investment that you have to continue down the line. We've invested in the hatchery, but we're not investing in the harbor. And I believe to expect a very small fleet to take a day off from work, I could see asking to volunteer on a Saturday, but not to lose a day's pay. And actually, this one red flag day that took place, most of the guys were back to the dock before noontime. And I thought to myself, gosh, if a guy, you're allowed to leave the dock up until noon, I believe. And if any of them wanted to go out and, maybe not get a limit, but at least 3 or 4 boxes to make up a little bit for the day, would have been a better part of the plan in my eyes. But Mr. DaCosta, please.
So 30 years ago, I was on this board, and back then, all the money that came from the shellfish licenses, and back then it was 250 commercial licenses, plus all the recreational licenses. Half of that money went to propagation. That was the budget for the hatchery.
75%, but
Yeah, 75%, excuse me. Right. With that money, we grew what little seed we could in the hatchery, and then we paid scholars to move seed after the season closed. We have
Paid.
after March 1st, after March 31st. To move seed from like Bass Shoal, where it was hatching, but when a stranding happened, it died. That's what happened. Some of it got moved, most people went out and shoveled it in their trucks and took it home and opened it, and that's what
I
happened.
remember those days.
I look at it from a different point of view. I tend to agree with Dave. Is that the multi-million-dollar investment that this town chose to vote through a town meeting to rebuild the hatchery, to make it a state-of-the-art hatchery. We used to have one town biologist. Tara, what's your staff now? 5, 6? The 20 or so scholars in the harbor. If you break it down apples to apples, how much money the town spends so that we all get a living through the winter, it's a lot more money that the town spends than what we make. So for me to take one day off, this isn't a novelty as far as I'm concerned. This isn't something that's going to keep happening year after. Maybe it will. I hope it does, because that means we're going to have a good year next year. But for me to take one day off during the course of the season to go move seed so that I have a really good next year, I'll sacrifice that day, to me. I'm not worried about not getting paid for one day. So that's my cut on it. Just from being on both sides of it, from being on the select board when I was and advocating so hard to get the hatchery rebuilt, because it was a push to get it through the board and through town meeting. Because most people say, well, there's enough scallops out there for these guys, they don't need it. So I feel like it's the least we can do. Now, I like your idea of going on Saturdays, and maybe the solution is there's other options that we can look at down the road where guys move seed, they get a voucher for a box that they can take later, you know, in the season. You know, this all happened so fast that we just did what we did. And I agree with the one day, the red flag day, but you know, we can look at this policy now that we have time, and we can come up with other alternatives. To where a guy goes and moves seed after he fishes that day, and he documents what he gets and moves, and then he gives it to Tara, he gives it to JC, and then he gets a voucher for a box that he can take later on in, you know, in the season. I think we did that at one point, didn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, so there's other options that we can use. But, for now, I just feel like it was the right thing to do.
I'm simply concerned that this one red flag day it's something new, I believe, and you don't mind giving one day, but it sets a precedent, and it could be 5 days, it could be 6 days, it could be 10 days. I mean, and as far as hoping that this doesn't continue in the future, we're seeing a decline in eelgrass over the years. And so it's possible we're
Well,
going to see more of
One
this
of
in
the
the
things that
future.
I thought, and I mean, if we're gonna have this discussion, I'll just bring it up real quick, is that, okay, we do something that we do now that's new, is we do the September survey. So Tara knew where that seed was in September. So why not put it out? If there's a lot of seed there, put it out to the fleet that between October 15th and November 1st, you put your boat in the water early, put your dredges on, you go move seed, and you get a voucher to go for scallops later on in the year. I mean, I would have been more than happy to move seed the last 2 weeks of October. I had my boat in the water. I would just tie the dredges on and go and move seed when the weather's nice, and got it into the deeper water. I think most of these guys would feel the same way, especially if I'm gonna get some compensation down the road that I can use that voucher later on.
Well, the voucher is another issue altogether, and JC has mentioned that he is not happy with how the voucher system worked in
He's
the past.
one man though. He's the
Well,
shellfish warden, ultimately the selectmen and the board are gonna tell him what he needs to do as his job. So, you know, other people have not liked vouchers too, but if the select board says we're gonna do this, then he has to deal with it.
Mr. Franzuto.
Which goes into the bigger discussion that we plan on having over this winter of looking at shellfish regulations and brainstorming these ideas. We're not gonna solve it now. And I think that the board needs to commit that we've said that we were gonna do this, and we will. And we can, you know, obviously have the public input from all sides. And I'm sure we'll come up with a good idea, but like Bob said, this was the best thing we could have done at the time. And if Tara came in here tonight and said, we have to do it again, by God, we ought to all support it. And, you know, again, I think that a Friday or Monday, I don't care. I think we agreed Friday was best for the buyers and all these other entities. But I think that the Friday works, and if you don't move seed, then you don't fish, and you can't benefit at other people's labor. And if we want to write the regulation where, fine, at noon, the flag comes down and you go get what you can between noon and 4:30, great. But that's the kind of thing that we need to be discussing over this winter. And I hope it does happen again. I hope we have this problem into the future.
Well, another, you know, looking at having, if there are more of them, I mean, how long until you take a very small amount, a very small fleet, and discourage them from scalloping because you're taking paid days away from them, and they go back to a land job? And Tara?
I mean, I just wanna say, like, the scheduled red flag day that we had was to prevent future red flag days. This is a crazy year with so much seed that's vulnerable that it was gonna be stranding after stranding. We already had 3 major strandings. And the one that we did recently, that was $1 million, in my opinion, could have been a red flag day, but it was 2 days before Stroll. So that would have been a terrible move for everybody. And so The reason why we have our own scallop boat now is so that we can proactively try to prevent these strandings, so everyone can keep fishing. We're out there every day that we can moving seed so that that red flag doesn't go up. So I was so happy when everybody went out and moved seed. It made me feel so good that people like cared about the fishery. I don't think that's ever really happened before. And from my opinion, I don't think that we're just gonna raise the red flag because we're feeling lazy and we need help. Like, this is gonna help the fishery if we do 1 or 2 more moves. I understand that there's gonna be strandings and we're not gonna be able to save it all. Like, there's gonna be stuff that dies on shore and stuff that we just can't deal with because of weather or whatever, or it's not worth it. But like, a little bit goes a long way, and I am really, really appreciative of the fishermen that kind of agree with that and can help 1 or 2 days out of the season. Like, I don't think it's gonna turn into, you have to do this or the red flag goes up. That would be stupid, and no one would want to work with us.
Mr. Brace?
I hear what Bobby said, and I agree with him. I agree with Dave and you, Andy. I think the article needs to be broader. You flesh it out a bit to include more of what the money might go for. But I think it should go through. This was just this year, and we had that moving, and we've had volunteers go on the beach when there were scallops that went on the beach, but we don't know what's coming. We don't know if it could be worse. And there could be, like Andy says, there could be 5 days where we need to close. And I think it's worthy having a fund to dip into so we don't have to lean on the NSA all the time. I think the money should be there because there may come a time when we're gonna need to pay people because we're throwing up so many red flags because there's so much seed. But then again, there may not be. You may not have a time when there's gonna be, next year could be complete opposite, but at least the money would be there.
And can I make a point about that? You can go to town meeting and you can appropriate that money. There's nothing in the book that says you have to spend it. And it can either roll forward or be reappropriated the following year. So if you use it, or if you need it, you use it. And that's the kind of language that should be in there. So it's not, so it doesn't become like so many other funds in this town that's a slush fund for some department. Oh, well, we'll just charge it to that. I was in that business for 30 years. I did it with the best of them. But my point is that if it's dedicated for this use and this use only, and you don't use it, then it either rolls forward or it gets reappropriated the following year. But at least the precedence is set and it's set aside. And somebody doesn't, be able to use it to go buy a new truck.
I just want
Wait a minute, Bob, one at a time. Bob, you'll come after Scott, who will come after Samantha, Mr. Brace.
Yeah, somewhere we gotta,
No,
somewhere we should come up with a hybrid, obviously, but I liken this to, if there's a fire in your neighborhood, you call the volunteer firemen. They're not looking to get compensated. They're looking to put the fire out and deal with the problem. And that's kind of what we're looking at here. Also, we came up with an emergency red flag day. And I thank everyone for going out there and volunteering their time. And that was your fire that day. You volunteered to put the fire out to create a revenue stream for yourselves into the future. So I think it's somewhere between having the volunteer fireman for Scalper to, getting some money to have something to solve a problem. We got to all work together and figure out, don't abandon it yet. Have that volunteer service ready to go. And then we'll figure out how can we help ease that pain of all those other expenses in the time.
with all due respect, I don't think we have volunteer firefighters.
No, I understand
I-
that, but that was my
like I said-
analogy of what it is.
Like I said, I'm all about volunteering. We used to create ball fields in the 70s when there were none, and it was all volunteer, but that's just not how things are working. And anyhow, Mr. Brace.
Yeah, I would say there are more fires that happen during the year than red flag days. And in terms of ball fields, with respect, Andy, for the soccer field reference, nobody goes to that soccer field except for the refs, maybe, and makes money. People go there to recreate, and so I'm just saying that.
But the field is supplied to them by
the town
tax dollars,
right?
And
right, but there's lots of things that the tax dollars that we pay pay for that, so you don't need to show up and help out and cut the lawn. I lost my train of thought, but basically, I'm just saying, you don't know how many of these red flag days might be coming along. And if there's only 20 or 25 scalpers going, eventually we're gonna wear you guys out. And they should get something, I think. And I remember the last meeting when Carl Sherlin was here and he kept hammering away at how, you know, he wants 100% participation. He wants everybody to help out. And I hear what he was saying, but you're not gonna get it. I think the money needs to be there.
Samantha, Danette?
So I think one of the things that came up the first time we discussed all of this is, and to liken it to the fire analogy, there are two things going on. There's strandings and there's management. And when you saw that, you know, over 30 fishermen showed up on that red flag day, there is a captive audience of people who are very willing to do this work. I think a stranding, it's on the beach, it's got to get dealt with. That's a fire. And they take a day off and they do it no matter what. Management, when we're proactively moving, while I understand it's meant to hopefully, you know, head off at the past strandings, I think when you look at managing, you're right, to Peter's point, you're gonna burn people out. So I think that's one distinction we do need to get a little bit clearer on, is how we're treating the two things, management versus stranding. I would also just make the brief point that we regularly talk about, this is the fishermen and it's their fishery and it's their economic advantage if they save it. There's also a massive, massive amount of people who recreationally enjoy this. So if our commercial fleet doesn't go out and move this seed, what are the implications for our recreational enjoyment, which is a really big part of our economy and culture on this island? So you're leaning on commercial fishing labor it's not just for their benefit, there is a recreational benefit. I think that's important to note. And the last, I have to say very respectfully, the NRD having a boat and doing this work is phenomenal. What they're doing out there is amazing, but very respectfully, they are town employees and they are being paid to go move that seed. So to ask fishermen to take a day off from work to not get paid and go even further in the red of their personal time, labor, wear and tear on their boat. If something breaks on the NRD boat moving seed, the town pays to fix that. The gas that they use moving seed, that is a town expense. And I think that that's wonderful and that should keep happening. But where the compensation of fishermen comes in, you know, again, respectfully, that is a team of people getting paid, and then you're asking people to do this labor and take on the risk of damage for free. I think that's where compensation is quite valid.
Good points. Thank you, Samantha. Anybody else? Mr. DaCosta, please.
If you're gonna go to funding for this, what you need to do, Andy, is, I would suggest, first, I would say $100,000 is too much. I would ask for maybe 50. I would not.
That was my
I would
first
maybe
number.
say that I would want it from the general fund, so to be less specific, because when you start talking about embarkation fees or mooring fees or different things, you're gonna get some pushback from administration, because they're gonna say, well, that money's already earmarked for summer specials or this and that. And I also would say that this is a revolving fund, and if we don't use it, it goes back into the general fund at the end, or it goes back into free money at the end of the year. So that it doesn't just sit there and stagnate. And then the article should be that this is an automatic reload every July 1st. So the money's there if we need it. If we don't need it, we give it back to the town, and the town uses it at the end of the year with free cash. So that makes the voter and the select board feel like, okay, we're not trying to get this money to do something else back. It's for this reason and this reason.
I knew you'd know something. So,
Not all of it, something.
any other discussion on seed management and red flag days?
This,
Jim?
Mr. I know at one point, I think it was 2003, we had a large stranding in Woolwin. And there was money in the fund at that time to pay people who came to help. I think they pay like $100 per person, 125 per person in the truck, and then there's some big boats involved. They paid $500 a day for them.
In what fund?
I don't know, they had money somewhere for it in
Propagation.
2003, so it's been done before.
I mean, that's fine.
That's before
But
NSA
the-
was
but
involved.
the problem between then and now is when, you know, when I started in the early nineties, you had 140 votes on opening day. Panel, you were there, Bobby, you were there. 140 votes on opening day. That's a lot of commercial licenses
And 2 guys per vote.
and 2 guys per vote. And I gotta tell you, we were selling 2,100 recreational permits. And they fought with me tooth and nail when I wanted to raise the price for the recreational permit from $15 to $25. But that was the money so my point, Jim, is that there was a heck of a lot more revenue coming in at that time. And the operation now is being subsidized by the general fund, and you don't have that revenue from the sale of licenses. I wish we did.
They also didn't have the hatchery, of course.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, we had the flexibility that, yeah, we could write checks for a couple $100 to each boat,
Right.
so.
It's also been 20 years since the last time we really did that.
That's the problem.
Should be some money somewhere for it.
Right.
Needs to be some
Also,
money
it's
somewhere.
The TAR's department
Right.
now, because back then we had one marine biologist, that was.
Right.
It was a one-man show.
Right.
Or one-person show.
But anyway, I just want to say that's the difference. You had a lot more revenue.
You have something you wanted to add, Tammy?
Tammy King. I heard you earlier, say that maybe going out after like at noon and getting your limit. What if you did 6 to 10 a couple days in a row, move the scallops and then have the day to get your limit? So scalpers are getting their pay and we're helping the community. I mean, I think that's a fairer deal than total no scallop pay. I mean, that's, some people, it's their extra spending money, but for others, it's their income. And you're taking away a whole income of a day. And it may not seem a lot to some people, but it's what's paying their mortgage or their rent or their food on their table.
Well,
And that's all, I know it's helping, but we can help and still have a day. And I think that's a fair
Shellfish.
request all around. I mean,
And like I said earlier, that's our job over the winter, is to build shellfish regulations around something like that.
yeah,
Okay, you also gotta remember, in 1991, we had over 440 commercial fishermen.
my parents are Joan and Oscar Bunting.
I know,
And so I
know.
know, but they had to feed families,
right, and
And they got
people
paid
still do.
right?
But 440 commercial licenses, because we had no work.
Right,
There was no carpentry, there was no restaurant job, there was nothing. We came up with a hardship criteria to put people fishing,
right.
so. Things have changed dramatically, but I think it's up to us over the winter to do these regulations and have input like yourself to come in and say, hey, you know, fish from 6:30 to 10:30, and after 10:30, it's a free for all, go get your limit. That's the kind of input that I would like to
Because I
have.
think it's a good balance.
Right, exactly.
Sorry.
Mr. Logan,
To Tammy's point there, and to Mr. Sterling's point, Bob was not here, about punitive measures for those that do not participate. Perhaps in this article that we're coming up with over winter times, that if we're gonna move seed voluntarily at some portion of the day, flag goes down, you can go commercially. If you do not move seed in the morning, you cannot go commercially fishing there, and then just make that
That's
the
exactly.
punitive aspect of it, if that, some people are looking for. So you help move seed and then go fish, or you don't go fish. I think that's easily managed, but this complete size to complete that.
well, and that's something that was left out of this red flag day, was any penalties for those whom did not help. you know, I can't say I'm a big fan of penalties either, but, I mean, you know, it could be a day that somebody that wasn't planning on going anyway because they had another more important family matter to take care of. So here again, it's kind of like keeping track of vouchers. How do you keep track of somebody's personal life on this red flag day? I'd like to, I'll get to you, Bob, but I'd like to hear from the board as far as you know, if we're going to pursue the select board and recommend an article for the warrant of the annual town meeting, I want to thank specifically Mr. Bossy for looking into it. I know that we can still do this, but time is of the essence. And I'd like to just hear from each board member if this is something you'd like to pursue. How much time do we have left? Maybe Bob can help us with that as well. But Mr. Brace?
I agree with the $50,000. And I think we should move forward.
And,
Mr. Ronzuto?
and Bob's suggestions of the general fund.
Yeah, revolving.
A revolver that, and it needs to be crafted with those words, because I had, the free cash is a
Go back into the free cash.
is a carrot to them. In other words, if we don't need it and we don't use it, they get to reappropriate it at the end of the year. So I think that those are, you know, maybe Bob you can help him with that.
Town council would be the one to write it. So
Right.
you'd have to go to the select board or to town administration, and say this is what we want to do.
Mr. Anderson?
I think we need to do it. Even if it failed for some reason, we gotta keep going back because the problem is not gonna go away. So I think we need to start it, get the warrant in there. The 50,000 seems reasonable. I'm usually somebody who's wants to ask more, knowing they're gonna cut it down anyways, but I think we have to start somewhere.
Mr. Sherrill?
I agree with it. I think 50,000.
Mr. Bossy?
I agree. I like Bob's suggestion and Dave's summation that we return the funds, 50,000. Anything that's unused is returned. I think it's great. I think we should move forward.
Ms. Andrews?
Yes, I absolutely agree. We should move forward, and I agree with Mr. Franzuto and Bob's suggestion.
Ms. Riley, could you tell us possibly how Natural Resources Department would react to this? We'd certainly like to have your input.
I mean, I'm not really sure. I know that like the sales of, I think last time we checked, the sales of commercial and recreational together amounted to like $50,000 or $60,000. Given the numbers that we're dealing with, recreational was definitely a huge chunk of it. I'm open to it. I don't have a problem with it, but I'm also not in charge of the money.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
I just want to, sorry, Bobby, just remind everyone that we have one more meeting before the end of the year on the 19th.
Right.
And we need to know that deadline for filing that and
Yeah.
what are we gonna do between now and the next meeting to perfect it if we have that much time.
Right.
Well, that's what I was gonna get at. So Bob DeCosta again. So at this point, the only people that can put an article in is the select board. The general public is closed, so you'd have to go to town administration and see if they would put the article. So then the select board would vote on it. Town council would write it and it would go into spring town meeting. If they don't want to do it, then we'd have to write an article that would be a citizen's petition that would go in for next town meeting. So that's, at this point in time, the only way to get it through is go through the select board.
And do you know how much time is left on that?
I'm not sure, I can't remember, they can go pretty late. But it's, when I say pretty late, I think they still have some time, but once the final warrant is adopted, then it starts to go through the FinCom and the planning board process, and
You can't get
they
anything.
can't add anything to it at that point. So, I would check with, town administration tomorrow and find out tell them what you want to do and see what the process is.
Just a second. Mr. Bossy, did you actually have a date when you were working on this information?
No, they didn't give me a date. They just said to get it to the board as soon as possible. I seem to recall January is in their time frame. What I wanted to suggest was that we outline this at this point. I'd like to propose a motion that we outline these couple, we only have a few bullet items really on this, for the appropriation, the amount, and the give back, if it's unspent. We make a motion, I'd like to make a motion that this board approve that and take it to the town council and ask them to write it up. I'm not sure, we'll have to check. I think we go through the clerk to do this, the clerk's office. Maybe Bob knows, and have town council do their assist, because they do that, to write that up from our little outline. And then we would, this board at our next meeting could vote to submit that to the select board.
Mr. Franzuto.
I think you gotta get permission from the selectmen
I
first.
think you gotta go to town administration.
I think you gotta,
They're the ones
We,
that are
we have a motion here.
Yeah,
I'm gonna second the motion.
thank you, Mr. Anderson. So the motion's been made to bring an outline, to the proper authority, for an article, requesting $50,000, from the general fund to be put into a revolving fund. And this is something that, will expect the correct wording from town council. The motion's been made by Mr. Bossy. It's been seconded by Mr. Anderson. Any more discussion on the motion, Mr. Franzuto, and then I'll get to Mr. DeCosta.
I believe you're gonna have to craft an outline. You're gonna have to take it to town administration, get it approved by the Board of Selectmen for consideration for the warrant, and then town council will help you craft it, if they approve to put it on the warrant. But if you called town council tomorrow and said, hey, I need some help with this article, they say, well, the selectmen need to approve it to be included. I just think we got the order backwards.
Mr.
I
DeCosta.
think it's 100% correct. You gotta go through administration to get to the select board and then go to town council. You could get to the select board and they might be able to put this in as a line item into the budget, and you don't even have to have an article. Because it's not a lot of money in the course of the budget. That's why I suggested you go to 50 instead of 100. Especially where it goes back into the free cash. They could allocate it into natural resource. And earmark it only for shellfish. So there are other ways.
Mr. Chairman?
Without having that article. So that's why I would start with town administration and go from there.
Meaning Erica. and
Erica, yeah.
The filter
Yeah.
through.
And she'll tell you where to go from there.
Mr. Bossy.
I would amend my motion. That makes perfect sense to me. So, that sounds like a fine plan.
Thank you. I don't know how much that amends the motion, but, simply going to, town administration. But thank you. So any more discussion on the motion? Since this is an agenda item, we can vote on it. So we have the motion to, craft an outline, bring it into, town administration and see where it can go from there. From Mr. Bossy, it's seconded by Mr. Anderson. All in favor, Mr. Bossy,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Sherlin,
Aye.
Ms. Andrews,
Aye.
Mr. Brace,
Aye.
Mr. Franzuto. The chair votes aye as well. Thank you. Any more discussion on seed management and red flag days? Harbor watershed public information outreach and ideas. This is a follow-up from the forum we held in September, which we'll be working on over the winter to try to create an informational and outreach program about harbor watershed, what's going into our storm drains, what's coming out of the 52 outfall pipes into our harbor, and the zones, the areas that all these storm drains are coming from. It's a very large area that I think good amount of the general public is unaware of. So is there any discussion on this tonight? We'll certainly be talking more about this in January. There's no discussion on this. Anything new on green crabs?
Nothing tonight.
Anybody have something they want to mention about green crabs? Harbor Action Plan Committee, SHAB recommendations. Mr. Franzuto.
We had a meeting yesterday. Urban Harbors is starting to flesh out the different sections, natural resources, water quality, critical infrastructure, environmental impacts and stuff. And they're starting to write the sections of the plan. So that's what we'll be looking forward to over the next couple of weeks. So that's where we're going with that.
All right, Tara, we've taken it off the agenda, until we hear more. Do you know of any action moving forward with the, dredge and sediment transport plan?
I don't have a current update for that.
Haven't heard anything in the office or anything. I mean, we'll get to Jeff about that. I know it's Jeff's thing, but just thought I'd ask.
I will tell you, it's an actionable item in the harbor plan for discussion, so
Yeah.
it's not losing any space.
Well, I had drafted that recommendation in the past, and I'm hoping, it gets in the hands of who we'd like.
No, it'll
to
be
see
included, it'll be included.
Any more discussion on the Harbor Action Plan Committee? Okay, so the next three items, Mr. Franzuto has added to our agenda recently, and Dave, I'm gonna ask you if we can keep discussion on this minimum, if not, push ahead to our next meeting or even into January so that we can take care of, discussion later on after new business, in public question or public comment for to deal with box limits.
All right, I'm just gonna give you one sentence on each one.
Okay, so this is ferry embarkation fee.
The finance director finally gave me the revenues and expenditures for the last, I believe, 4 or 5 years. I believe, this is just my opinion, in doing the math numerous times. I believe that it's either being misreported or underreported, and I would like to think it's underreported. My proposal is still going to be to raise the ferry embarkation fee from 50 cents to $1 per trip. And if there is, and I believe there is, because I reread the legislation today, I believe there's an exemption for commuter tickets. And probably part of my change to this is going to be to remove that exemption. The alternative ferry pier, I think I sent around photographs and charts and everything for everybody to look at, to try to get an idea of where I'm talking about on the east side of the West Jetty. Okay, so this would be an alternate ferry pier, a public fishing pier funded by the Public Access Board, and a second in-town boat ramp also funded by the Public Access Board. So that's that proposal. And then Petrol Landing, I know that there was some emails going around and some explanations of the litigation and all that. And my answer to that is, okay, that's nice, but we've been dealing with this for 15 years. We came up with a plan. I believe that the plan needs to be revised, if it has to be revised down to a lesser facility than was proposed that is being litigated. And if we just deal with the increase of the dinghy dock space along Petrol Landing to relieve the congestion that you heard about a couple of weeks ago from the harbor master at the town pier dinghy dock, I just don't want that. I'm at a point where I believe that we need to do something with the property. The pilings are still there. Plans can still be moved forward. If they want to scale it back and remove some of the commercial activity that we propose, that's fine. But I think we still need to keep moving forward. And then the third thing, the fourth thing was down under new business, which is the removal of Marine Department from the police department. That's pretty straightforward, just, in 2012, it was removed and became under the police department. I believe it needs to be reestablished as its own standalone department. I've been having discussions about budgets and people's concern about funding this and doing that and everything. I honestly believe that it just needs to be returned into its own standalone entity. Those are the 4 items that I wanted to.
Have you spoken to Sheila about that in
Uh,
particular?
As a matter of fact, I have. And,
Okay.
she, I believe, would be in the support of.
And I know. I respect Mr. Brace and Mr. Bossy about wanting to hold off on Petro Landing discussion. I still feel as though, even though it's in litigation, if we could somehow encourage the land bank to create a plan that is more welcoming to commercial activity, possibly influence them to get their, since the pilings are still there, as Mr. Franzuto mentioned, I just don't understand why they don't keep it more active, because the people who don't want to see the new activity take place there have now gotten used to a very quiet Petro Landing. There's nothing going on there. It's blocked off. Used to be able to at least pull up in your car and sit there and eat lunch. And when the ramp went out to the little floating docks there, the floating docks that Steve Walker had there could probably accommodate 30 or 40 dinghies at the least.
And that's exactly what I'm saying, is I don't want this to be, just because it's in litigation of a grandiose plan, I don't want it to die. And I mean, we used to run a launch service out of there. We used to do, Steve Walker rented sailboats. It was always active.
Of course, there's been some erosion and it may be considered unsafe, but I think, landward, closer to landward is still could be operational with.
But Mr. Chairman, building, not to belabor this, but to build install sheet piling around that existing rock and fill it and stabilize it and put a 60-foot dinghy dock along the south face of it is not gonna bother anybody.
Well, that we can't,
That's what the neighbors don't want.
exactly.
We would hope that, but
Board members, any discussion on these 4 items? Ferry embarkation fee, the alternate ferry pier, Petro Landing, or removing marine department from the police department?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Anderson first, I'll get to you next.
In regard to the piers, Dave,
Ginger?
how long is that process?
thank
Because I started looking, you're gonna have to dredge to get to it.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to go through, a bundle of
I agree.
environmental
I-
people, and so I think we gotta work this on this.
I certainly agree, but if, I'm pushing to have it included in the harbor plan as an action item. And, they said that we couldn't rebuild the jetties too. And we got that done for 10.5 million, so. I think it's one of those things, I agree with you wholeheartedly, it's gonna take some time, but if it's an action item in the harbor plan. Then those environmental folks and whoever need to start doing, they can start working on it.
Ms. Andrews?
Yeah, I got an email a couple of days ago about I believe it's at the federal level, something about some working waterfront legislation. So I don't have any more details than that, but I think that could be a benefit to getting Petro Landing back to the former uses, which were all commercial. It's highly ironic that you save it as a place and then destroy the use of it. So that's my 2 cents.
Well put, Ginger. Ginger, can you forward that to Mr. Brace?
I
and he
will,
can
yep,
Send it out to the rest of us. Thank you.
yep.
Any more discussion from the board?
Yes.
Mr. Brace.
With respect, Andy, we can write all the letters we want to the land bank and say, we want to do this, that, and the other thing. You know, I sent that email around to all of us that came from Jesse Bell. That was an update on the situation. And in that, it said that on December 17th, they're going to have some sort of decision. So I don't think the land bank is going to be forgetting about this, and they're hot to do something there. So it's not going to go away, but we're wasting our time if we write something up and say, do this, change this. This is what we recommend. We need to hear what the decision is and then hear from the land bank.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Brace. From the public, Mr. DeCosta.
Just a quick thing on Petro Landing. They are gonna get, I believe you're right, Peter, they are gonna get a decision, but I can almost guarantee you that whatever the land bank has planned there, it won't have any commercial use. So, and that's really what we need. We do need another dinghy dock, Dave. I'm not gonna argue that one with you. But, we need a solid fill pier that we can back a truck down to, and Jimmy can unload pots, and I can get a fuel truck in there a lot more than I need a
Bingo, yeah.
But
I
if,
agree.
if I may, I did the original plan, Bobby, and you could back, change the things around with a mooring field, you can back a 35-foot boat right up there with a gantry, bring a fuel truck. And but that's what I believe is being litigated. But yeah,
I mean, I have
that was it.
my mooring is right there.
Yep.
And if I could get a fuel truck in there, I'd give up my mooring. Well, I'd move it. I won't give it up.
Mr. Sherlin.
I was gonna comment that it maybe doesn't have to be solid field pier, but if you had like heavy duty wood pier like they have someplace in Maine, where you can drive a heavy vehicle over it, that might be all you need. You don't need to get rid of the stone. Just quick discussion.
Right.
I don't think you need to solid fill it, like, which is being argued about so much.
All right.
You're exactly right.
If there's no more discussion on these 4 items, we're gonna move forward, new business. Brought up by Miss Andrews, the dump scallop shell pile. The runoff from it crossing Mattocket Road. Causing everybody to have to drive through salty scallop juice. I find myself, slowing down to 5 miles an hour when I go through it, because I really don't want to have that flipping up in my fender wells. And I truly believe that some simple grading, some simple changes out there could resolve this problem. So Ms. Andrews, if you would, suggestion, simple recommendation.
Well, I think it's really, what the solution is up to the DPW, but we could ask them to, find a solution for, getting the gulls and the juice further from the road. Is that vague enough for everybody?
I could be a
Perfect.
little unvague.
Please do, Mr. Anderson.
What they've created is a defective highway, which creates liability for the town. You put the town on notice as a defect in the road, there's an accident there, then they're liable for it.
Good point.
Scallop juice can be.
Well, I think I came in last tonight, it was snowing out there, and that's something so free.
Put them back in the jetties.
Right,
Didn't bother them.
right, I agree. Well, suggestions from the board, anybody want to make a motion that we somehow, make a recommendation to the select board? I think we have to go through the select board, not straight to the DPW. Mr. Brace, you want to help us out with that? As far as what direction we'd go in to start with, and, then if you actually are going to draft a recommendation, then we'll vote on it.
Are you saying you want me to write a letter?
No, I'm asking, first procedure wise, would we make the recommendation to the select board or go straight to the DPW? Because
You just call the DPW and see if they can do anything about it, and could the pile go beyond the gates back in there somewhere? Because the oyster pile is back there for sure, and there's lots of room. Plus, No, I don't know how it works. I'm sure it works the same way the oysters do, but when you pull into the dump on the entrance that the public uses and you go in there, and before you make the turn to go over where you're gonna get rid of your stuff, there's, you know, in between several Jersey barriers is all this material. There's the loam that's created by the sludge and the compost or whatever, but then there's a pile of scallop shells that people can come and take. And so eventually someone brings an earth mover out there and takes the shells that are outside of the gate at that entrance where we're all talking about and brings them inside. And they sit there and cure until they're ready for the public to take them. So maybe it's a simple thing where we ask them to pick up that pile a lot sooner. And, or maybe have it inside somewhere where we dump it.
Well, the bottom line is resolving the issue of the juice crossing the street. So, Mr. Ponzito.
My suggestion would be is just ask Carlson to give him a call. Department head say, hey, this was raised at Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board meeting. The danger of the road and the spill, and just have Carlson call him and say, hey, can you take care of this for us? That would be my recommendation.
I would go at it from the public safety point of view.
Yeah, I think that's a strong public safety.
Yeah, it's a good point, Scott.
And the other part is if they pull the scallop piles back, there's more people jamming on their brakes, so they don't hit a seagull. I mean, most
Right.
people are just gonna drive, but when you get somebody who jams on their brakes and people are following, you're gonna end up with more problems than the juice.
Well, I would imagine most people are turning around on the bike path as well, which is what I've done when I dump there, so.
It's easier for us to ask Carlson to do it than, go to the.
Mr.
select.
Chairman?
Simple thing.
Ms. Andrews,
Oh, I think they moved the pile back just about daily. It was fine when there weren't that many scallops and there weren't that many people fishing. I mean, they're still not like they used to be, but I think it would actually save them trouble in the long run. I don't have a sense of procedurally how to do it, but my thought was just that we write a letter to the whoever is appropriate and ask that point out the problem and ask for a solution.
thank you, Ginger. Thank you for having us add this to the agenda. I'd like to mention to the public that we have to have our agenda submitted 3 business days before our meeting. So normally Peter and I will create the agenda on a Friday morning. If it's a 3-day weekend, we create the agenda on a Thursday morning. And anybody can request something to be on our agenda. So get in touch with one of us. If you want something on the agenda, like the catch limit, we can certainly do that. And I mean, we can have catch limit on our next on the agenda for our next meeting. We just simply couldn't put it. I didn't hear about it until Friday. So and we had already done the agenda, so it was too late to actually get it on there, but we will discuss it next. Anybody who's gonna call Mr. Carlson about the shell pile? Yeah. Thank you, Tara. Any more discussion on the shell pile? Okay, public questions and comment, anything the public would like to comment on any of the agenda items we just spoke about? Anything new from the public? Which is catch. Who wants to open that up? There's discussion about raising the limit from $5 to 6. Is that what I've heard? Does somebody have a presentation, Mr. Knapp, Mr. DeCosta?
But I have comments on it, but let everyone else speak and then I'll bring up the ribs.
Okay,
I mean, basically, it's been kind of slowly being discussed of, what it would look like to increase the bushel limit from 5 to 6 for the remainder of the season. We've surveyed the fleet, the Shellfish Association, kind of as their representative has. The yield of the catch this year is significantly lower than previous years. So one of the points of interest in raising that limit is to kind of make up the remainder. To my understanding, yields are around 6 pounds per box. as opposed to previous seasons where it's closer to 8, sometimes 9. So for the same amount of boxes, they're bringing in significantly less product. I think that's maybe the driving factor. It's being brought up this time of year. Demand is high, and to my understanding, there's not the ability to meet the demand right now. At the holiday season, there are wholesalers, there are off-island markets reaching out, wanting more scallops than we are able to provide. So demand, to my understanding, is not an issue. It's a significantly smaller fleet than we've had in recent years. I think, about 15, maybe 20 boats on a nice day. So adding 1 bushel per person would not significantly impact the overall catch as far as what's coming out of the harbor, but it could significantly impact, the economic stability of the individuals. On the opposite side, there's concern about adding this addition of bushels. What does that mean for pricing? What does that mean for the longevity of the season? So those are kind of the concerns that have come up. Happy to let it go into discussion, and it's not an exact science, but we have a bit of a rough estimate of who's in favor, who is not. I emailed 62 commercial license holders. I've personally spoken to 32 of them. I think that's actually up to 34 in the last couple hours. So there's still a few people that have not responded. Again, as was noted with the Red Flag Day, I am the director of the Nantucket Shellfish Association. I am not official communication from the town of Nantucket. So there is no requirement on anyone's part to read my emails or answer them. Thankfully, most people are interested in the topic and do. So again, mine is not official communication, but we have surveyed the fleet on everyone's behalf.
Thank you, Samantha. Mr. Brace.
So you've spoken to 34 people. What's the general consensus? That's my first question. And then my second question is, I guess that would be for Tara. Does the supply and the water support this? Is it something that people will be able to go get, and not just through the 2 cream months of November and December, but well into the season, realizing that some guys are just not going to go, and our hardcore experienced fishermen are going to pound it out through the rest of the season. So would this then take away from those people who want to continue to go? And I guess the third question would be, and I guess that's for Dave Franzuto, does the state have to sign off on this
No, the state limits 10 bushels, so.
per license?
Yeah, so,
Okay. So,
we would recommend to the selectmen that they raise it to 6 and they would vote it, and there's no state requirement.
Do we even need to recommend it?
Well, it would,
I mean, we can certainly give our support, but do we have to have a formal recommendation in writing?
I would think so. I would think you would, say to them that.
Well, before we go too far, I
Yeah,
certainly
let's
want to
hear
hear from our town biologist, because Mr. Brace's last question makes a lot of sense. I've heard from scallopers that there are a large amount of adult out there. It seems like, if there's 2 people per boat and there's 15 to 20 boats out there, we're talking about adding, 30 to 40 bushel more of take per day, which really doesn't sound like a lot in the scope of things. I think that 1 extra box makes a big difference in the pocket of the fishermen, who well deserves this for their hard work. Coming from the days of a 6 bag limit, we all know a bag held about 1.5 boxes. So, Tara, please, if do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I have an opinion. I think now with the state of the fishery and the seed and how it's fluctuating a lot, I think we need the ability to raise or lower the bushel count that's being harvested. And so I think it would be an important exercise to go through the process and see what that looks like. I did talk to Jeff before this meeting because I wanted to understand the process, because I've never been through this before with a bushel change, and he wasn't exactly sure, because it does involve a town regulation, how cut and dry it would be if there was, like reporting, or publicly posting, this change, and what the comment period would be, and what that process would look like starting this time of year. So that's something we have to talk to town council about, but I think moving from 5 to 6 is not a big deal. All I have to go by are what people are harvesting and what's coming back from JC. And, he did say that some people are getting their limit, some people are not limiting out. So I don't really know if people are just not finding scallops, or they just want 3 and they need to go home. I'm not sure. I think next year, absolutely, we can go up to 10 if all of these scallops survive. I think there's gonna be plenty. So having that ability to move around with it from season to season, I think is a good thing for the future. And I have no problem with what's being suggested. I can't give you a definite answer on like what the process is like, and if it would be a timely one to benefit people. Because if there is like 30-day comment periods, it could be February, so.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that there is, I may be wrong, but because it says, the way the regulation is written is, upon approval of the Board of Selectmen. So I have a feeling it's a letter, if we want to recommend this or whatever, that you would say that you want to raise the bushel limit to 6, and the selectman would say yes or no. And they may elect to have a public hearing, but it's at their discretion, it's at their regulation.
I think there was a little bit of confusion because it is listed twice in the regulations, and the one where it said the Board of Selectmen have the discretion was for an emergency situation to change it.
Oh.
So that's where the confusion was, that we wanted to get some clarification on.
Well, to that point, that's probably correct, because it's usually at the end of the season when you're jockeying to take some extra boxes before March 31st. So I think you're right, it's probably that emergency that they're talking about. Okay, that's good.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Bossy,
could we have our secretary ask Erica to have that clarified for us, so that at our next meeting, we know exactly what the rules are and how things might be, what our recommendations might be able to carry with the select board? What's possible and what's not?
yes, Dave, thanks.
Just want to say a couple of things.
Mr. Brace.
If there's a public hearing, that's 3 weeks of advertising before we have the public hearing. So that, I don't know how that affects what we're all talking about doing. I also wanted to know, of the commercial licenses that were sold for this year, how many guys are going and how many are just sort of doing shore work or whatever. And if there are 10, 12, however many, if we add another box, does everybody in the room think that now you might get a lot of people going all of a sudden into the fishery because they're gonna be, oh boy, there's more? Just a thought. And yes, I can ask Erica what to do.
I certainly stand to be corrected, but some reason I'm thinking it's as simple as Mr. Carlson making the request to the select board, but I may be wrong. Mr. DeCosta.
Andy, I think I remember my procedures from when I was on the select board. It would be as simple as, Mr. Carlson putting it on the agenda. It would come on for tomorrow night because they'd have to post it with their agenda, and it has to be on there for, I believe it's 48 hours. So just to go through a timeline for you, today's the 5th. The soonest it could go on the select board's agenda would be the 13th. If they were to vote it through that night, I believe that it would go, they could set a date for it to go in, and I would assume, based on what my experiences with the select board and JC and Jeff, that they wouldn't do it the following day because they'd have to somehow notify everyone. So I would assume that it would start on December the 18th. That's probably the absolute dead drop soon as we could get this done. More than likely, I would tend to think that they would want to have some more discussion about it. Because I'm sure there'll be people there that'll speak on either side of it, and it will probably go to January 1. That being said, personally, myself, my opinion on it is, we've done it in the past. Like Dave said, mostly in Mattocket, when years we had banner years of adults and we didn't want them to die. So later in the season, we went to as much as 10 boxes one year. This is different. This isn't a banner abundance of adults that we're worried are gonna die. This is all about the yield. So this is a whole different animal that's never really gone in front of the town before. Where in the past, when we went to the select board, we said, look, there's a lot of scallops out there. They're dying. They're gonna die if we don't harvest them. Okay, go ahead, up your limit. In this case, we're asking for more scallops because we're not getting as much money in our pocket. That's basically the bottom line.
Yeah.
This is about yield. That's all it's about. It's about going from 30 pounds a day to 40 pounds a day. The extra box will get us back up around 40 pounds.
Bob, is it all about yields? Because I'm hearing and actually looking at some of the scallops on shanty benches and seeing they seem like they're older.
All right, let me give it to you this way, Andy. I fished Mattocket for almost 3 months last winter. The exact same size scallop was in Mattocket. I was averaging 30 to 32 pounds a day, and they were getting 40 pounds a day in town. So it is fluctuation of yield. I personally, and everyone's got their own theory, I think it's because there was so much seed in the harbor this year. The adults didn't get enough nutrition, and they just didn't grow.
Well,
That's my personal opinion.
And, I'm just trying to actually bolster the argument to raise the box limit, that it's not just yields, that
But
it's the health of the scallop itself.
it is, but here's my theory. I don't think that there's so many scallops in the harbor this year that we're not gonna catch them all, based on what I've been seeing every day. And I like to be able to scallop through the whole season, so for me, the extra box now, I could carry it away, especially where, if this had happened on November 15th, and we had the last month to sell these scallops, but there's gonna be there's a high demand until Christmas, maybe into New Year's, and then it drops off. Last year in January, the buyers didn't want them, and I'm afraid that they're gonna use this as the excuse to drop the price in January 1, like, oh, you guys want an extra box, now I can't get rid of the scallops, so I'm gonna drop the price $5 or $6 a pound. So I agree with Tara. I think we should have the ability to do this on a moment's notice based on what's out there. So it might be good to just go through the procedure to see how it is done, but if it isn't gonna happen here quick, in the next, like by the 18th at the latest, then I would personally say, let's just not go through the process, especially if it's not gonna start till Christmas or January 1.
I do like to think that there's more leniency into changing that, whereas the state already has it set at 10, but we'll go by your timeline.
Yeah, I mean, I know they have.
Now, that's a conservative
They're gonna
timeline.
have to advertise it on their agenda, just like you do. You have to have your agenda 3 days out. They can't just put this on unless we change the bylaw to say that this is an emergency action, and then under the emergency act, they can put it on their agenda that night, the day up. So it's an emergency.
All right, Mr. Sherlin.
Sure, from what I've seen scalloping this year, I don't think there's any reason to raise the limit yet. I don't think there's any huge banner crop out there to catch. There's scallops, but I don't think it's anything, a huge amount like other years we've had. I would recommend, if we're gonna change the limit to 6, to wait till January 15th. And reevaluate then, see how people are doing fishing wise. Most fishermen I've talked to were opposed to raising the limit to 6 boxes.
Williams?
Nope, sorry. Can I add one more thing to that? I think something in the future, like the baseball fishery basically shuts itself down when you can't catch your limit, guys could do something else. Something I maybe recommend in the future is automatically raise the limit to 6 boxes January 15th to allow guys who are still going to get 6 boxes if they can. That's it. That's all I got.
Yeah, I've been, peddling scallops for a while now, and peddling scallops is like a very fast moving card game. It changes very, very quickly. there's a couple things you can take to the bank. The strongest part of the season is from now through the new year. The worst part of the season is after the new year until about February. It's just a terrible time to try and unload a lot of weight on the market. The buyers' favorite days are Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Thursday and Friday are bad or terrible. They don't like it. You know, if you want to move some weight on the market, the time to do it, have 6 boxes on like a Monday or a Tuesday when the market is strong.
Right.
What you don't want to do is say January 1st, we're going to raise the limit to 6 boxes. You're going to have to catch an open 40 pounds to make as much, you know, as if you had caught 30 pounds. It changes very, very quickly, and you don't know, you know, who they're peddling them to. They're gonna be looking to freeze them. Nothing freezes better than low price scallops. So you gotta be real careful when you do these things, and you gotta do it real quick. You know, the Arabs know when to pump oil and when not to pump oil, and they don't take long to change their mind. You know, so you can't like go, oh, we're gonna change it to 6 boxes for the rest of the season, because that may not work for you. You know, it changes week to week. You know, and last year it crashed before Christmas, and it was a result of inflation and people cutting back, and that wasn't predictable. So it's very fast moving.
Andy,
Yeah.
Mr. Brace.
thanks, Bill. Can we hear from Samantha of everyone you talked to? What did they say? What do they want to do?
So of the folks that did respond, for starters, there's a little over a dozen people that we still have not heard from. And what I would we talked about the size of the fleet. I emailed people who have licenses, and to answer your question, how many of them actually are fishing? The people who didn't respond are realistically the people not fishing. So that's the caveat. So of the about 34 people, 50% of those people are in favor of moving to 6 boxes ASAP. I think part of this process, understanding how long it takes, we need to talk about, but 50% of the people want to raise the limit immediately if they could. There's about 10 people who don't. So 50% say yes, about 30% of the people say no. And then that last 20% that did respond really fall in this camp of, I could be swayed either way. I want to hear more, whatever the majority of the fleet, I'll go with. So there is still kind of a contingency of people that are, open to either.
It'd be great to, sorry, Andy.
Go ahead, Peter.
It'd be great if there were seafood store owners here in the audience who would comment. Maybe you guys all know what they would say, but that'd be another perspective.
Mr. Frangido.
I mean, this is, it's not like we're at March 1st and we got a whole lot of scallops to catch before March 31st. And Pennell's exactly right. The buyers have a tough time moving scallops on Thursday and Friday because a lot of this stuff is going to these big markets. And those scallops sit over the weekend and are sitting in a showcase on Monday morning. And they're just not a good product at that point. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, those scallops hit for the weekend. And people are in there buying when they're nice and fresh. So Pennell's exactly right. And he's also exactly right where it's a moving target. What's the price right now?
I think a good price is 25.
Okay,
It's between 20 and 25.
okay,
From the fish markets to you guys.
So the fish,
to the fisher.
I think the fish markets here are paying 20. If you're going off island or some of the other smaller markets, it's high as 25.
I'm glad to hear you getting 20 locally at least. Mr. Nat?
I think the exercise of doing this, like Tara said, is so important. And I think,
I'm getting 20 next.
there's secrets about price.
Honestly.
So, but again, I to pull it full circle, I think when something like, to go back to seed management versus stranding, a stranding is black and white, cut and dry, we know what the rules are. This new, area of having to understand what seed management looks like and how do we handle it, what do the regulations look like, that's very gray. I think this is a situation where, this needs to move towards being a dynamically managed fishery. Where to change a bushel limit, for this to take potentially 30, 40 days to go into effect and layers and layers. I think that that's a fishery of yesteryear. I think when you look at, max 30 guys trying to make a living. I think it is an interesting project this winter to look at the regulations and figure out how we can be more nimble and, take the science into account, what's in the harbor that they're seeing in September, take the economics into account that realistically, you're making the most of your living in the first 2 months of the season and be able to respond to these situations faster than 30+ days. That's not the way, unfortunately, that's not the way things work anymore.
Well, I disagree. If this was March 15th, as the Marine Superintendent, when I had that job, I would have walked into the selectmen on a Wednesday night and I would have said, hey, there's more scallops out there than we're gonna catch by the end of March, and that's an emergency. And they would have voted it, and the next, or the two days after that, after we got the word out, would have been done. So I think it could be expedited. But what the new territory is that the jury's out. Our biologist says, hey, maybe there's enough to get us through the season. One of our fishermen, shad members said, hey, maybe there's enough to get us through the season. That's not an emergency. That's not an overburdening evidence that we ought to go marching in there. I think the situation is different. And I think if it was an emergency, just like the red flag day, we could get this slam dunk for next Monday.
If I may, I'm not saying that it's an emergency at all.
It's not.
I'm agreeing with you that it's completely not an emergency. What I'm saying is, if we have the Natural Resources Department, by the way, spending hours and hours and hours underwater in September, the wear and tear that Tara's team puts on their bodies doing the harbor survey is astronomical. And so we have all this data, and what are we doing with it? I'm saying moving towards a more dynamic response of, sorry, was this your first municipal meeting? I'm so sorry.
Mr. Chairman?
Thanks for being here. Ms. Andrews.
But I think that's what I'm trying to say is looking at this more holistically, more long-term of how are we taking the learnings of September's survey? And again, not to open a can of worms, but if they did a survey and said, you know what, there's a specific section of this harbor that is in such poor health, we can't in good conscience have a fleet fishing in that particular area, then we might, if we're going to move towards a dynamic fishery that responds to the economics for the benefit of the fishermen, then we also need to have part of that dynamic side respond to the health of the habitat. It's not an either or. So we're not just talking about the yield and money in fishermen's pockets. We're talking about what the fishery looks like going forward in lots of ways. Otherwise, why are we doing this whole survey in September?
Thank you, Sam. Just a second, John. Ginger, please.
Yeah, I think it's the buyer's problem to be nimble. I think it's easier for the fishermen if they know what they're going out to, what the rules are and not keep changing them on them because, it's hard enough to keep up.
Related to what rules?
The box limit. I mean,
Okay.
I think Dave is right. If it's an emergency, it's an emergency and you act quickly. Just to, that the changes in price and the marketing, that's not something that you control with the box limit. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Ginger. Mr. Logan.
There's a lot to this, and I'm in favor of raising the box limit only because what I see right now is the economics behind it for one, but the environment behind it as well. There is a lot of stuff. Every dredge that I pull up, it's a mixed bag of stuff. And when I get it to the shanty, I'm throwing a lot of it away. It's already on its way out. If we are gonna wait till January, February, March to raise the box limit to catch something that we know we can't ever catch all of, we're talking about a worse product to try to peddle. I think also reflecting back on last year particularly, there was scallops in a lot of different places on the Cape and the world. So the market was saturated. Right now, it's not. I think from what I understand, Nantucket has some of the only scallops available in Kimberley. And it's the 5th of December and 4 or 5 toes, you get your limit and go home. To me, that's good fishing. Having said that, most of the fleet has been in just a couple of areas. Second bend hasn't been touched yet. First bend's barely been touched yet. Hussey Shoal hasn't opened up yet. So I think there's a lot of potential if we get hopefully some win-win these days to blow things around and fluff things up. But I think there's a lot of the harbor that still has yet to be investigated or even offer an opportunity for us to go actually see what's in there. Having said that, I'm in favor of going to 6 now while we have an economic opportunity and also environmental responsibility to take some of the stuff that's gonna cloud the bottom of the harbor in the next couple of months.
Thank you, John. Any more discussion?
Oh, one more point to that, please. Sorry.
Yes,
I think the law of diminishing return here doesn't exist with 20 boats in the fleet.
the laws of what?
Diminishing return. So if we catch 6 boxes now, it doesn't mean they're not gonna be enough in February and March with 20 guys in the fleet. And come January 15th, it's gonna be a drop in the fleet already. So I think we're okay if we raise the block limit now. For the guys that want to continue to fish through, I think there's gonna be nothing.
I'd just like to poll the board on how they feel in case something can move forward with Mr. Carlson between now and our next meeting, which is not till 2 weeks from today. So that we know how the board feels, whether you're in approval of raising the limit to 6 boxes or not. Start with Mr. Graves.
Well,
Yeah, we're almost done.
just to be clear, this wasn't on the agenda.
Yeah.
It's not an agenda item we can vote on.
I'm not asking for a vote. I'm
Okay, well,
polling.
and I also want to say that, you know, for you guys to get me to talk to Erica, that has just to be my goodwill. I have to decide that that's a good thing for me to do. You can't vote to have me do that or write a letter. So just making sure we all understand each other. All that said, you know, I'd be in support of raising the limit. If we get a consensus from the scalpers that that's what they want to do, or just to be prepared to do it. So I guess I'm kind of wishy-washy on that.
I'm gonna continue with the poll first, Mr. DeCosta. Mr. Bossy?
Quite frankly, I'm not in favor of this poll because I don't think we should be doing it, public meeting at this time. However, you always know my feelings about that. I'm kind of in favor of holding it off, this discussion until later when we decide what kind of scallops are left out there in the bay and what needs to be taken for the year.
Thank you, Mr. Bossy. Ms. Andrews, I'm gonna continue with the poll.
From what I've heard so far, I don't really have enough information to say yay or nay. My feeling is that it's that it shouldn't be changed yet, and I'd like to hear more reasons. I think the yield has a lot to do with you know, there's more than just the health of the scallop as a factor. It's the skill of the opener. You know, it's where they're fishing. I mean, I just don't. I haven't been persuaded yet.
Thank you, Ginger. Mr. Anderson.
I need more information before I can make a decision one way or the other. I'm into supporting the fishermen. The yield is important. I need you to make money, so we do have a good fleet. But I don't have enough information right now.
Mr. Sherlin, thank you, Scott.
I feel it's a little too early in season to make that decision. I'm not against the idea at all. But I think maybe it should even go to a fisherman vote for a decision on raising it or not.
Mr. Fonzuto.
Yeah, I think we need to know a little bit more, but I'm kind of believe we should leave it at 5 boxes.
Right. Well, for the record, I would be in favor of raising it, the limit tomorrow, and I don't think it's it would be detrimental to the fishery at all, and having seen what I see on some of the shanty benches, it looks like the product could become less desirable as time goes on, and that concerns me. Thank you, board members. Mr. DeCosta.
Mr. Chairman, if you so please, you can post an emergency meeting, 48 hours notice, and you can have this as the agenda item, and then you can make a recommendation to selectmen before their Wednesday meeting. You can get it to them by Monday, and they can get it on their agenda for Wednesday, if you so please, you can do that.
And within that time, do we get the information that it sounds like I need?
Giving you a path to how to
Yeah.
get to where you want to be.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. DeCosta. Mr. Nat?
Through the chair, may I ask the board, I kind of heard across a lot of you that you were looking for more information. May I, through the chair, ask what types of questions you would like answered so that we could be supportive in getting that information to you all in the most timely manner?
We'll start with Mr. Anderson.
I'll give feedback on that. So it seems there's so many places, it seems in the harbor that haven't been fished yet. How do we know it's all gonna come in at 6? It could come in higher. It could come in lower weights per. So I think we need to understand the more dispersed we are in getting our catch and our yield, are we consistent with the weight?
Can, before we go on from that, because I want to elaborate on that question a little more. I'd like to think it's safe to say that what we're seeing on the Scallop Bench, no matter what part of the harbor it came from, is fairly average in being not only lesser in weight, but also a decreased appearance in health. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Sherwin. I mean,
I would say some areas that typically are much better are not. Like, would you say the same for Timney's, Bob, where you've been fishing a lot, or off of Shimla? Yeah, they look small. Yeah, it's 6 pounds pretty much everywhere you go. Maybe there's some places that are worse. I think maybe down off like Glazes is actually less.
Yeah, it might be
Like 5 or something down there. So I don't think there's anywhere that's gonna be 8.
okay.
And Connecticut was 6.
7, yeah. 6, it wasn't 7.
Mr. Bossy, anything in particular, more than what Mr. Anderson has asked for as far as information that you'd like to hear to answer Mr. Nett's question? Dave, you with us? I'm gonna jump over to Ginger. Ginger, anything in particular for information that you
Well,
would like to hear before being able to come to a decision?
Yeah, I'd like to hear more from the town biologist about the health of the scallops, and I'd like a consensus of more of the fishermen, and half of them said yes and some didn't respond. I just like more I just don't think it's clear enough. So the more information that could be provided, the better. I'm not really convinced either way yet, and
That's perfectly understood.
I'm not entirely sure why, except that it's, this has been a very long meeting, and I'm losing my patience. If there's anything else that's important that we need to talk about, let's get to it.
All right, well, this is our last item. Mr. Franzuto, anything in particular?
Yeah, I think if, in my opinion, I defer to Tara and her staff. If they say that the fishery can support it, then I would support it, but the other arguments are arguments that have been made for years and years and years about yield and weights and buyers and all that stuff. Biologist says taking 6 boxes per limit or taking an extra box per limit is not gonna be detrimental to the fishery and it's sustainable through March 31st. I certainly support it.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask Tara a question, if I can.
Please do.
During your fall surveys, when you do like counts of areas, is there any idea of like a possible number of bushels in the harbor off of that survey, or is it not enough survey to possibly?
I mean, it's 40 sites, it's a snapshot in the harbor, and so I know in the past when Mariah Mitchell used to do the same surveys, they used to kind of guesstimate how many bushels were gonna come out, and they were way off a lot
Okay.
for that time.
Mhm.
So, part of, like, we do the physical surveys, but we do not handle the analysis, so that's currently going on right now and compared to all the past years, so I think that we need to move towards having a correlation from the surveys to what's coming out of the water, but there's a lot of variables like fishing pressure and that sort of thing that might not correlate with what we're seeing.
Okay.
Mr. Logan,
Just one comment about raising this limit. It's not a mandate, it's an opportunity. So if you only want to take 3 boxes, you want to take, but if we have the opportunity, we're in a good area for a few weeks, can get 6, fine, but it's not a mandate, it's an opportunity.
and does Ken Kelly still fish?
Yes.
You know, in talking with Ken in the past, he's like, I don't fish past 11, whether I have 2 boxes, 3 boxes, 4 boxes, I'm coming in.
Steamship whistles says lunch bell.
I'm sorry?
The steamship whistle says lunch bell.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a lot of people's lunch bell.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, any more discussion on this topic tonight from anybody from the board, staff, public? Mr. Anderwald, anything you'd like to add, please?
Enjoying all the news.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, thank you all. Our next meeting is December 19th, unless we feel the need to call an emergency meeting. After that will be January 2nd. That's always nice, the day after New Year's. Anything, board members would like to add to the agenda for our next meeting? You know, you can always call us ahead of time. Friday before. If there's nothing else tonight, I will accept the motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion is made by Mr. Anderson to adjourn tonight's meeting, seconded by Mr. Sherlin. All in favor, Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Sherlin,
Aye.
Mr. Franzuto.
Aye.
Mr. Brace.
Aye.
Ms. Andrews,
Aye.
Mr. Bossy with us still?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Good night, everyone. This meeting's adjourned.
Good night.
Thank you.